Greetings, esteemed classmates. Christopher Long here to talk about the life of William Thomas Rice. William Rice was a railroad man. Born in the year 1912, he gains a college education, then goes to work as a track inspector for the Pennsylvania Railroad. By 1955, he is president of the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad. Then in 1957, becomes president of the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad. Now, the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad was one of the principal railroads of the American East. It would take produce from Florida and Georgia to the north, then coming south, it would bring tourists to enjoy the warmer climates of Florida, the beaches, the tourist areas, what have you. Now, by the middle of the 20th century, American railroads are in serious trouble. There is fierce competition. The railroads are being challenged by the airlines and by the trucking industry. Trucking technology has improved. We're about to really build the interstate system. Airlines are coming into the passenger trade that the railroads had been servicing for many years. Now, railroad fortunes since the foundation of the American railroad industry had ebbed and flowed. Some railroads had even failed. But until this time, railroads were unchallenged. They had a monopoly on travel from city to city, unless the cities happened to be on a waterway of some sort. So to go inland, you had to take the railroad. That was the only real effective way to move back and forth. The interstate and the airlines challenged that. And Rice was among the principal advocates of railroads adopting a new tactic, that of the merger. Now, railroads have been merging ever since the foundation of the American railroad industry. In fact, throughout American history, there were 6,000 railroads. By this time period, the mid-20th century, there are 400. But these mergers usually had the pattern of a larger railroad acquiring a smaller railroad, one that was less physically viable, one that was struggling a little bit. It would buy that railroad and extend its trackage, it would extend its territory. What Rice proposed was this: even railroads that were solvent should merge and combine their efforts. For example, one of the Atlantic Coast Line's principal competitors in terms of the railroad was the the Seacoast Airline Railroad. Sometimes their tracks ran parallel for several hundred miles. They carried the same kind of cargoes, brought the same tourists down to the south. So Rice, among others, but Rice had the idea, why don't we merge our efforts together? If we merge, we can reduce the facilities that we have to maintain. Increased revenue can allow us to build newer, more modern facilities. We can invest in better, more modern passenger equipment and perhaps even compete with the railroads for passenger travel. And also, instead of having several smaller railroads, by having one large railroad, trains can move from one point to the other. They don't have to interchange to a different railroad. There's no bureaucracy, no paperwork involved with that. Trains can now be longer. It was just simply more efficient. So Rice was an advocate of this. He leads his railroad, the Atlantic Coast Line, to merge with the Seacoast Airline Railroad, and they form the Seacoast Line. The Seacoast Line exists for several years, but those issues I mentioned really don't go away. In 1980, Rice again leads a merger effort. He leads his railroad, the Seacoast Line, to merge with the Chessie system. Now, whereas the Seacoast line had the East Coast, chassis system was about coal. So now you have a new railroad, Seacoast and chassis system combined, that has the coal fields, the East Coast, creating a powerful, powerful road, what we would today we call a Class 1 railroad. That road is, of course, CSX, chassis and seaboard combined, crossed together. Like I said, there have been over 6,000 railroads in American history. There are still some smaller railroads about, but today we only have 4 Class 1 railroads, all the result of mergers. CSX, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, there is the Union Pacific, and there is, of course, also one more, and that would be the Norfolk Southern, making America one of the most powerful railroad nations in the entire world. Again, because of mergers, an architect of many of those mergers was William Thomas Rice.